Okay, so we talked about sort of the rate laws of the E2 and E1 reactions. Let's do a little comparison here. Okay, so let's start with a simple E2 reaction. So here we know we would do the E2 reaction there. Let's look at sort of our E1 reaction. Again, they're both elimination reactions, right? So we're always forming an alkene as our product. How can you determine whether you have the E2 or the E1? Right, the E2 is generally going to use a strong base, NaOH, NaOAT, NaOMe, potassium T-butoxide. Generally with the E1, you're just using your solvent. And again, with the E1, you really have to start with a tertiary alkyl chloride. So let's write our rate laws for these. So for the E2, it's second order. The rate is determined by the rate constant times the concentration of my alkyl halide times the concentration of my base. For the E1, our rate is equal to our rate constant times just the concentration of my alkyl halide. Okay, so again, rate refers to the speed of the reaction. So let's kind of do a little thought experiment looking at this. So looking at the E2 reaction, if I run the reaction, what would happen to the rate of the reaction, right, if I doubled the mass of the alkyl halide I had? So let's say I ran the reaction once and I used 1 mole of this, and then the second time everything else is the same, but I used 2 moles of this. What would the effect be? Right, so if we double the amount of alkyl halide, what would happen to the reaction? Right, so if we double the amount of this, that means this concentration would be twice as much. So overall, our rate for the E2 would be twice as fast. What about for the E1? Right, if we double the amount of my alkyl halide, I've doubled this concentration. Again, my rate would be 2 times as fast. Okay, pretty simple. All right. In the E2 reaction, what would happen if I doubled, what would happen if I doubled the, what if I double the amount of the alkyl halide and the base, right? So if I double this amount, I have twice as much here. If I double the amount of sodium hydroxide, I have twice as much here. So now my rate would be what? This is a 2x, that's a 2x, so it would be 4 times as fast. Okay, it would be 4 times as fast. For the E1, right, we don't really have a base, so there's no base, so we don't really have to worry about that for the E1. My next question is, what would happen if I double the amount of solvent? What if I double the amount of solvent? All right, so what effect does solvent have? We have to remember that we're looking at concentrations. These are concentrations, right? So when I have a bracket of something, that is a concentration. What is concentration? It's amount per volume. right? So concentration is either going to be like molarity, moles per liter, or it could be molality, grams per liter, all right? So what happens if I double the amount of our solvent, all right? So if everything else is the same, this mass is the same, that mass is the same, but instead of like saying 10 mils of water, I now use 20, what effect does that have on our concentration? If I've doubled my volume, I've now decreased the concentration, right? So if I've doubled my solvent, I've doubled the denominator here, so it's now 1/2, right? In the E2, the solvent affects the concentration of the alkyl halide and it affects the concentration of the base. So what that means is this reaction, right, would be 1/4 of the speed, right? So it would be 4 times slower, 4 times slower. What about with the E1? So if we look at the E1 here, the rate is only determined by the concentration of the alkyl halide. So if I double the amount of water, if I double my solvent here, I've now decreased the concentration by half, right? So when we're looking at doubling amount of the solvent, for the E1 reaction, that would be half as fast or 2 times slower, all right? So I just wanted to walk through a few examples so we understand, right? So we understand our rate laws here, right? We understand that these are concentration values. Concentration can be affected by amount we use, right? But it can also be affected by the amount of the alkyl halide or the base in the E2, the E1, just the amount of the alkyl halide. But the solvent also affects our concentration.